The musty smell of elk hung softly in the thick forest. A slight breeze pushed it down the slope to the trailing hunters. Without a sound, the young hunter eased upward through the snowy thicket. He had often joked with exaggerated pride that he could move through the country like ground fog. Now every fiber in his body was trying to make that true. Ahead, shadowy forms of elk picked their way upward. The frosty mist of their breath hung in the air as they worked through a jumble of downed trees. It was a perfect hideaway for elk in Montana's Gallatin Range. The mountain was steep, it faced northeast, and it was covered with blowdown, an old-growth pine that was giving way to a thick growth of spruce. Elk knew the place well, and they took shelter there, secure in the wild tangle. The law allowed the taking of antlered bulls, and the hunter searched for antlers as he and the elk maneuvered upward, slowly pushing through thigh-deep powder snow. Then suddenly he saw it, right above him, staring at him, an elk, watching him. He studied the motionless face that peered through the tangled timber. It was close. Less than 30 yards separated them. The boy was sure he could see the base of the bull's antlers, but the heavy timber obscured everything else. The two watched each other, first caught in mutual surprise and then frozen in suspended time. The need for a decision was upon them both. In the stillness of that silent thicket, hearts pounded and tension stretched the minutes. It was the boy's first chance to kill an elk, and years of expectation had been carried up the mountain to this moment. The elk would not move, not a twitch. The hunter needed something to reveal, to confirm without a doubt the presence of antlers. The boy's father shadowed the stalk, and the youth turned his head, looking to his father for verification that it was right to shoot. That slight motion broke the stalemate, and the thicket erupted as elk bolted and crashed away through the timber. In a moment, silence absorbed the hunters as the sounds of fleeing elk faded beyond the high ridge and into the frigid November evening. The memory of that hunt remains fresh. It was a great hunt, and it remains a cherished memory. The richness of the recollection comes from knowing the hunter's first concern was to do what was absolutely right. Doing right at the critical moment was more important than killing a fine bull elk. There was a doubt, so the boy did not shoot. In time, he would realize that the hunt had already been fulfilled. Taking an elk is exciting any time in a hunter's life. To pass up the chance to kill your first because of a small doubt about whether or not everything is absolutely right remains the teacher's trophy. It is part of being an ethical hunter. The epilogue to this true life hunter's tale is that the mountains marked that day in a way only mountains, forests, marshes, woodlots, and seasoned hunters understand. In this case, a few years later, the same hunter took a good bull not far from that tangled slope. As with all game, it was a gift the land gave the hunter, and it is possible that there was a connection between the elk passed by years earlier and the elk that was taken. The gift of the harvested bull was deeply appreciated. However, the hunters had already been given the highest satisfaction from the snowy thicket on that other November afternoon. It was a magic moment when a young hunter and a mountain looked long into each other's eyes, and they became one. It is a curious thing that something as private and at times as solitary as hunting attracts the attention of so many people with different points of view. Aldo Leopold, a thoughtful person and the father of American game management, once wrote, "A peculiar virtue in wildlife ethics is that the hunter ordinarily has no gallery to applaud or disapprove of his conduct. Whatever his acts, they are dictated by his own conscience rather than a mob of onlookers. It is difficult to exaggerate the importance of this fact, especially when you're solo. You're just out there alone. What you do, how you decide to hunt, only you know." Today, there are many thoughtful people saying that perhaps it is time that hunting end. Many of these people are bothered by how some hunters behave. This book is about hunter behavior or hunter ethics. Its purpose is to emphasize the hunting experience, its importance and its meaning, and to remind all hunters of their responsibility to respect and care for all wildlife. So that's the preface of the book, Beyond Fair Chase, The Ethic and Tradition of Hunting, written by Jim Posewitz. This book I've read a number of times. It's a short book. What is it? About 100 pages, somewhere in there. And you can see they're not like real pages. It's a tiny 3x4 inch book, almost square. And in this book, it's kind of I'd say it's sort of a guide to hunting. Ethics, it says the ethic and tradition of hunting. And it's kind of just Jim's idea on what hunting is all about in a little short opinion piece, that goes into, hey, this is what hunting is and why it matters and how you should conduct yourself, and an essay of Jim's on what it's all about. It's a great book to talk about if we're going to talk about what hunting is, what the ethics around hunting should be. And it gets into some interesting, for me, it gets into some interesting idea. I don't necessarily agree with everything that is in the book. Or maybe I do agree, but I have some caveats.
Yeah.
But overall, yes, it's a great book. And especially for those new to hunting or people who are experiencing or feel like they might experience a moral quandary with the activity of hunting and what that means. If all hunters understood the concept of beyond fair chase that Jim is promoting in this book, I think hunters would be far more respected and valued than they are sometimes today by the mainstream public. There's some things that but at the same time, I'm a freedom-loving American that wants to just do what I think is right despite what anyone else thinks. So it's I'm catch-22. I'm a little bit both ways on some of this. But I'm going to jump into it. I think it's a really good read. Stick with me on this. I think you're going to appreciate it. But before we do, I want to remind you to use the code GRITTY at Mountain Ops and at Sissy Sticks. And if you're looking for some custom orthotics, check out Sheep Feet. Our friend Mark Livesey has an excellent e-scouting course online. Use the code GRITTY there. You get a discount. Helps us out. As always, you can find all our partners in the description field on the YouTube videos, below our videos there. Click on those links, use the codes, and get yourself some good deals. And it also helps us keep doing what we do. So we appreciate all the support. Also, if you want to get a Gritty hat or shirt, you can always go to briancall.com and get one. And that helps us too. All right. So you have the young man on his,
first elk hunt?
On a major elk. Yeah, one of his first elk hunt. It would be his first kill for sure. Has a bull in the sights within range he could take. At least he thinks it's a bull. But what happens, he's like, I'm not sure. They have a standoff. He thinks he can see the antlers, but he just can't be for sure. And it's not legal to shoot a bull, to shoot a cow, rather. So he's trying to confirm, and that costs him the opportunity, right? Many of us have been there before. If you've hunted long enough, it will happen to you at some point where you're not sure if the animal you're going after, let's say a sheep or something like that, is of the proper age class or the proper sex on a bear or something, and therefore you start to pass on an opportunity, or the delay in deciding causes you to miss an opportunity. According to Jim Posowitz, his idea, what he's getting at is, the fact that he didn't risk making the mistake was a victory in itself. The fact that he stuck to his ethics and didn't risk shooting an animal that was illegal is where the win is. That's where the value is. That's where it really matters. And this quote by Aldo Leopold is very apropos as well. A peculiar virtue in wildlife ethics is that the hunter ordinarily has no gallery to applaud or disapprove of his conduct. Whatever his acts, they are dictated by his own conscience rather than a mob of onlookers. Now, I would say, and he says it is difficult to exaggerate the importance of this fact. I would say that today, though, we do have video cameras, and we do have iPhones, and we do have social media, and everyone has a platform. And
how many people do you know got caught poaching because they posted something on social?
Yeah. Well, I think that now we do somewhat have a mob of onlookers that might impact your decision making in a way that in the past was never the case. That it can be a very private experience, but now it can be a very public experience as well. And it can be both good and bad, because you might take a shot off camera that you would never take on camera, right?
True.
Or you might for the glory of the internet, you might take a shot at an animal that's not ethical to try to kill it so you can get the glory of killing the biggest animal. I can't think of
anyone in the hunting industry that would do that, Brian. That's just ridiculous.
So this question of ethics is really interesting, and so we're going to get into that. Back to the book. The most important measure of hunting success is how you feel about yourself, how you feel when you think about and plan your hunting trip, when you are hunting, when you kill, when you tell about it, and when you remember each experience. Yeah, the most important measure of hunting success is how you feel about yourself. In today's world where so much is shaped by likes and follows in social, which those who followed my show for a while realize I absolutely hate social media. If I could wipe it off the planet, I would. I don't know that it's really helped civilization. However, as with all...
It has not made us more civilized.
As with all types of technology, it is a double-edged sword. It does have a lot of benefits as well. But this idea, like he's saying, it doesn't matter what animal you kill. It doesn't matter how big or small. It doesn't matter how much meat you bring home. None of this matters, except mostly what matters most, he's saying, is how you feel about what you do. That's an interesting idea. Like, he's basically calling on your conscience, right? To dictate your actions, to dictate your how you hunt. And so your conscience really does play a big role in deciding what's right or wrong, you know? And he says, not only does he say the most important measure of hunting success is how you feel about yourself, he says it's also how you feel when you think about and plan your trip. It's about how you feel about yourself when you're hunting, when you kill, and when you tell about it, and when you remember, okay? So he's basically linking your conscience to the whole thing, not just this piece or that piece. And I resonate with this because if I look back on some of my fondest hunting memories and experiences, it's positive all the way around.
Mm-hmm. Who you're hunting with, how you hunted, where you're hunted.
Yes. And some of the most memorable and meaningful ones are the ones where they were the hardest, the most challenging, the most unlikely, unlikely successful hunts that turned out successful. You know what I mean? And they're the most rewarding. They are the most, the ones that stick out in my memory. There are other ones where I've been, hey, Brian, come over here onto this private property. We'll pay for this hunt and you can do this. And even though I killed a great animal, it does not have this same feeling of success. It doesn't have that, where he says the most important measure of hunting success is how you feel about yourself. Years ago, I was out hunting elk with Dad. It was me and him, and we had been watching this bull for a couple days, and he was giant. Mm-hmm. Bryce was there too. But Dad and I were moving in on this bull, and we had patterned him 2 days in a row. We had kept the wind just right. We knew where he would come down this logging road with his herd, and then he would cross over onto this private property. Well, ethically, perfectly legal to shoot him in this area as he was moving from a feeding area to the private property. So I knew the route he took, and I knew I could arrow him and drop him before he got to the private. Well, one thing led to another, as happens on public land. Some dude finally saw the herd that we had been patiently working on for a couple of days.
And he made a beeline straight at it.
And he just made a beeline straight at it with the wind at his back, blowing at him, screaming on a little bite and blow call. And it was just so frustrating. That was a big bull, and he was dead to rights, man. I was going to smoke that bull. So we end up running to head him off as they go down this other alternate route, which we'd seen him take a couple of times. I get into position, and there's the road. It goes down the hill. Well, I'm about 20 yards, 15 or 20 yards from the fence line that's private property. But it goes on an angle, and everything out in front is all public. And here he is he's coming down the road, and he's probably 200 yards from the fence line where he's at. And we close the distance, and I get to 30 yards of this bull. Now to my left, so out in front of me, the bull's 30 yards. He's on public land. 30 yards to my left, he would be on private. The bull, I come to full draw on this bull, and 2 cows step in front of him right as I'm about to kill him. And he's a giant, and he's just standing there. You know, Dad's running a camera. I've got everything set. I can just smoke this bull. And then the cow moves, and I might be able to fish it in, but I might not. Another cow steps in. Multiple cows step in. So while his cows are moving past and kind of in the way, he's just staring at me, broadside. And then he decides to move on. And he goes down the hill, and we're just standing there. We're like, dang it. He goes all the way down this hill, jumps the fence, and then runs right back to where we're standing. And now he's 20 yards away from me, but on the other side of the fence. And I'm sitting there going, you're talking feet, 1 foot between, this waist high fence and this bull, between what is legal and illegal. And I remember just staring at that bull, and he stood there, screamed, bugled. It's like he knew he was on the other side of the fence, just stood there. I had to decide, okay, am I going to be ethical and shoot the bull or not shoot the bull? It's tempting because he's giant. But in my mind, it's like, I know he's a bull of a lifetime. We've been working really hard to try to kill this bull. It was so frustrating to have that guy blow it for us when we're that close. Probably wasn't going to be on public land for the rest of the season after that pressure. I remember thinking to myself, every time I tell the story about this bull, every time he's on the wall or maybe in the garage, whatever happens, every time I will remember that I shot him illegally, that I violated my own ethics, whether anyone else knows about it or not. Every time I tell that story to my buddies and to my friends, I'll know that it's a lie. It was very easy for me to just say, no, it's not worth it. I just don't want it. I don't want it if it's going to come with that baggage, with that dishonesty hung on my chest of, I don't want it. Don't want it. And often when I think about anything, in life where I'm tempted to do something that's wrong, that I know is wrong, my conscience tells me is wrong, and I'm fully aware that no one will probably ever know about it, it still haunts me that I'll know about it. And every time I'm reminded of something that could be a great success or a great experience, it'll be tainted by the violation of those principles that I hold dear, I understand the temptation that people have for breaking game laws and stuff, but I sometimes struggle with, the idea of leaving. It's like cheating on your wife. I see someone do that. It boggles my mind because you got to live with that, whether she knows or not. There's a violation of principles there or of ethics that is so dark and such a betrayal, and it's such a fraud. I just think that's a dark thing to carry around with you your whole life. And the same is true when you break a game violation in hunting. Anyway, just a tangent there, a little food for thought as we dive into this ethics discussion. So he continues on, Jim Posowitz. He says, feeling good about yourself as a hunter depends upon several things. One of those things is how well you understand your role as a hunter. The others are how you behave as you go about the preparation, the hunt, the killing, and the activities that follow. In short, feeling good as a hunter depends on how you think, what you value, and how you conduct yourself. This book is about values and customs of behavior that guide the actions of hunters. In other words, this book is about hunter ethics. The ideas in this book will help you on the path of ethical hunting. The learning process will last for as long as you hunt. There will be times when the best hunter will make a mistake. You will get excited, perhaps be tired, or just make a poor decision. The important point is to always make the best of what you do. Always keep trying and always keep improving. If you hunt long enough, especially I would say with a bow and arrow, things are going to go badly. Unfortunately, it takes some experience in a life or death situation to realize, okay, that was I thought I could pull this off, but I was naive or inexperienced and I made a bad choice. I shouldn't have let her rip in these conditions or in this pouring rain or maybe through these bushes. And every shot you take, you're gambling. Every single shot, even the slam dunk shots are a gamble. Nothing's guaranteed. And making the decision on when to launch an arrow and when not to, or when to shoot a gun and when not to, and under what conditions, that just takes experience. And you're going to fail. And sometimes I see people, especially some ladies, they'll wound an animal or children or young people. And then they'll have to follow up with it and they'll see it suffering. And it's enough to make them not want to hunt again. I see a lot of archers who get buck fever every time. And when they hit animals, they just wound them and they want to hang it up. They want to quit. And they practice and they practice and they practice. But I'll tell you that's what makes hunting so special, is that it's so hard, that it's so complex. And what makes it great and so rewarding in so many ways is the fact that you've overcome those mistakes. Like, you're going to make them, but that you learn from those and you're like, okay, I won't make that. And what I have found out over the years is it feels really good. It feels really, really good to feel like, okay, I've turned a corner on this particular skill where I'm actually quite proficient now. I don't make this sort of mistake. Maybe it's with a map. Maybe it's with foot care in your boots. Maybe it's with archery gear. Maybe it's your setup. Maybe it's your technique. Each of these little things, maybe it's how the wind got you again. And every time you progress down that road as a hunter, you start to put pieces together, if you stick with it, that makes you more and more competent. And it's a good feeling when you're finally, feeling good in your skin out there doing these things that I think is deep down in our DNA, something that we're really meant to do. And I'll get into that next. And he says, these changes, as time goes on, you'll find your values and your behavior changing. These changes will bring you greater satisfaction as you become a seasoned hunter. While no one will be perfect, knowing you did the best you could will bring great satisfaction, right? All right, going on. So we're going to talk about sort of, the DNA of a hunter. What's our history as human beings, and what does it mean? This chapter right here, it's called The Place of the Hunter. For more than 1 million years, our ancestors were socially organized, using tools and hunting. In North America, 10,000 years ago, they hunted beaver as large as bear. Do you hear that, Brent?
Large as a bear.
Beaver as large as bear. Ground sloths as tall as giraffes, longhorned bison, caribou, horses, muskox, and mammoths. As recently as 300 years ago, hunting and gathering societies were common throughout the world. We are the children of these generations of hunters. Today, most people in the world do not have the opportunity to be hunters. Chances are they never will. How those of us who live in the United States gain this privilege is important. It is important because keeping it will depend on how you conduct yourself as a hunter and how you care for the animals you hunt. In short, it depends on your ethical behavior. And I think that's one of the reasons why this book is so important. One time I did a podcast around perception, and why it matters. Truth matters, but so does perception when it comes to public policy. And how you as a hunter conduct yourself, how you treat animals, what people perceive your motives are, really matters when it comes to hunting. So if we want to keep the hunting privilege in the United States the way it is today, it's incumbent upon us to conduct our behavior in a way around hunting that the non-hunter can be comfortable with. I say this all the time. It doesn't matter if you have, facts and stuff on your side. Feelings, unfortunately, sway public opinion dramatically. In fact, people let their emotions today, like trump, no pun intended, their logic, right? And so this comes up often, how should you represent hunting? How should you put it forward into the world in a way that, that people can get behind it and respect it, even though it's hard for them to see an animal be killed, right? So I think this is a really valid discussion. I say it all the time that people don't care that you kill an animal. Brent, they don't care that you kill a whitetail. They don't care that you kill an elk. They don't care that you kill a black bear. Mm-hmm. They care why you killed the black bear. They care why you killed the elk. They care why you killed the mule deer. That's what they care about. And I think it's because it's deep within each of us, that DNA, that we gotta consume life to live. Life eats life. There's an acceptance that, yes, I eat meat, therefore it makes sense that you eat meat and everyone else eats meat and so on. But they want to know that you're doing it for the right reasons. And so as a hunter, those motives need to be clear. And those motives are mixed. It's not like I only hunt for food. I don't only hunt for the adventure. I don't only hunt for the time to be outside and to connect with nature. I don't only hunt for health reasons. Like, there's a lot of reasons why I hunt. The adventure, the adrenaline, but the food, all those things matter. And it's important, I think, as hunters that we communicate the whole idea to the public, right? And it's important to the public that I don't do it for shallow reasons, right? I don't kill just for the joy of killing. I don't kill and leave the meat behind because it's just for the act of adventure. All of it's a package, like it all matters. That's why I like producing the hunt film, because the film that we're producing, it helps people see the whole thing. Like, we're excited to be there. We're not making it into anything extra. It's just, this is the hunt and this is how we do it. And this is why we want the meat. We want the adventure. We want to connect with nature. We want the struggle, the hardship, the grind. We want to suffer and we want to overcome. Like, there's this whole thing. We want an adventure. That's where video really helps show a non-hunter the whole thing that we're about.
We got a question on one of our last bear hunting videos, and it was very polite by someone who's a non-hunter, and they basically were asking, why you guys gunning down all these bears? Like, are they pests? Are they harming things? Do you guys, is it for pelts? Is it for trophies? Are you guys eating the meat? And it just so happened on like that one episode we shot a bear, but did not show us eating the meat.
Yeah.
The one.
It gets redundant to throw meat eating in every episode, but
it's kind of critical to tell the whole story.
For some reason, I don't get tired of watching meat being consumed.
There are channels dedicated to people eating food.
Like Meat Eater was classic, right? He shot the animal in the field and he ate the animal in the field. And that resonated with me because it's like, I do that. And, it's sort of like the pack out. I show that too because I do that. But in the past, your typical hunt film doesn't show you eating it in the field and didn't show you packing it out. It just showed a stalk and a kill or something of that nature, which I think left out so much of the why we hunt.
There was a really flattering comment. I was trying to find it, but I couldn't find it. But basically, the guy was saying he appreciated the way that we tell the story because it represents hunting in a really great light. But there was one line at the end. Whenever I watch your films, it makes me think I can do that.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
Like, he's changing how someone wants to hunt. That's pretty epic.
Yeah. Well, this is one of the reasons this book is produced. Is he's saying he wrote this book is if we're going to keep hunting and we really do need hunting to ensure sustainable wildlife. It's a good management tool. It also is it's better on the environment. I think they said 300 million pounds of whitetail meat are consumed by Americans every year. That was years ago. 300 million pounds of wild harvested meat is a lot of meat to replace with something else. And that's an opportunity cost you've got to pay if you decide to stop hunting. Where does that 300 million pounds of meat come from after that? And in the case of the whitetail world, these are deer that if you don't reduce them.
They could take over the United States. 1 year, if you banned hunting for 1 year, could you think about how population would explode?
You could have deer just the car insurance rates would jack up as you smash them on highways and roads.
The death toll of humans,
the amount of
automobile deaths,
the crop damage,
people starving from whitetail eating food.
Anyway, the future of hunting does, though, depend on the ethical behavior of hunters. And so we're going to dive into that a little bit more. Although the United States is home to a rich mixture of people from all parts of the world, as well as descendants of Native American tribes, the law that grants us the chance to be hunters had its origins in Europe. The exceptions to this are the Native Americans' rights to hunt, which are guaranteed by treaty. When European kings ruled over land and people, they owned the wildlife, and they granted they favored the rights to take wild game. As a result, hunting was reserved for the royalty, not the common people. When the American colonies declared their independence, many things changed, and one of those changes had to do with how the rights to fish and wildlife. Early in American history, the Supreme Court ruled that property that once belonged to the king had passed to all of the people in the U.S., all citizens. This meant that wild animals in the country belonged to all the people equally. This was an important decision. It confirmed that our privilege to hunt was gained the same way as our other basic liberties, and it led to our current system of public hunting and fishing. As America was settled, many wildlife populations declined. Since wild animals were owned by no one in particular, people were free to kill and sell them. Regulations and limits didn't seem necessary because wildlife was so abundant. As a result, enormous numbers were killed for commercial purposes. Their hides, meat, feathers, and other parts became resources in an unregulated marketplace. It was wildlife's darkest hour, and national tragedies occurred. One example was the extinction of the passenger pigeon. Another was the tragic loss of the great bison herds. The disaster was not restricted to the passenger pigeon and bison alone. Deer, elk, ducks, geese, fish, egrets, and all manner of fish and wildlife had commercial or subsistence value. The uncontrolled taking of wildlife went on wherever there was settlement of people. With the exception of isolated pockets of wild animals and remote parts of the extreme north, the loss was almost total and complete. An awful loneliness hushed our young nation. It was at that point some Americans concluded that there had to be a better way. They believed that wildlife could and should be restored and conserved. Those people were almost, without exception, hunters. They began a fish and wildlife conservation effort that restored wildlife to every state in the nation. There are 5 important things to remember about your role as a hunter. First, the opportunity and privilege to hunt is yours by virtue of your citizenship. Second, the animals you hunt are the result of conservation efforts of recreational hunters who stopped the market hunting and commerce in wildlife. Third, these early hunters began the restoration and conservation of wildlife that continues to this day. Fourth, as a hunter, you have a responsibility to future generations, those still in the womb of time, to see the conservation of the animals you hunt. And fifth, you have the responsibility to be a safe and ethical hunter. So yes, we were at the brink of extinction for much of our wildlife. We had market hunting and other factors and settlements, people just trying to survive and carve out a future, cattle running everywhere. We wiped out the native wild animal populations. And
you think how crazy people are about hunting turkeys? Mm-hmm. Think if they could hunt some dodos.
Well, yeah, it'd be great. I mean, remember when the turkeys, I think there were something like just turkeys left in a couple of states at the time. I don't remember what their all-time low number was, but only a few states had turkeys. You fast forward today, I think there's turkeys in every single state in the United States. I think even Alaska. Is there a state that doesn't have turkeys?
Gosh,
look that up, young
I'm
gritty Broman.
Right?
Look that up. I'm pretty sure I heard Runella say basically there are states jam-packed with turkeys that never historically had turkeys. In the first place, we've done so well with turkeys.
So in 1973, there were approximately 1.5 million wild turkeys throughout all of North America. Mm-hmm. In 40 years, they have reached a historic number of 6.7 million turkeys. So from 1963, we had 1.5, and we currently have 6.7.
I think those numbers are low.
They are from the
I think you need to look up better numbers.
National Wild Turkey Federation.
That's not bad. Which states had turkeys? Because when I grew up, there were really no turkeys in Oregon. Never remember seeing turkeys when we were hunting elk or deer or anything. Now I see turkeys all over Oregon. Just same is true for a lot of species. Okay, so here's the thing, Brent. The book goes on to point out that despite our excellent conservation record and how hunting has really, the North American model of conservation has really brought back animals from the brink of extinction and really, really helped our populations boom.
Okay, step back. 30,000
turkeys. Yeah, that's what I mean.
And by the late 1930s, the United States record reached as low as 30,000 turkeys across the entire U.S.
So in the United States, the population was basically...
It was almost totally extirpated.
Extirpated.
Yeah, from Canada.
Extirpated is a sort of... It just means it's kind of like extinct in that area.
Kicked out.
Extinct in extirpated from the state of Montana means they're extinct in Montana, but not extinct as a species. They're somewhere else, but extirpated from the United States or from certain states. But you're saying it was 30,000, and now it's 30 million turkeys.
6.7 million.
Okay. So from 30,000 turkeys at an all-time low to 6.7 million turkeys today. Yeah. That's the change that's taken place.
Yeah. Once we started putting in some game laws, we started saving them. But it was really a habitat, loss of habitat. We started planting shrubs and...
Yeah. The same is true with ducks and wetlands.
Yeah. Ducks got wrecked.
It had a lot to do. Now we have great waterfowl populations. So we've done a good job, but Jim goes on in this book to point out that even though we have... Some people argue that hunting should be stopped, and we see it all the time, right? That hunting should be stopped, that hunting is not ethical. He says, at times their arguments are based on the behavior of hunters. So back to the motives of why you hunt, or at least the perceived motives. Maybe your motives are pure and true, but the way you present your activities, it looks as though they're not. To keep our opportunity to hunt, we must always remember that wildlife belongs to all the people. The future of hunting depends upon how the majority of people view hunters. These people form their opinions when they see how we hunt and how we care for and about wildlife. I think it really matters when people, I have a lot of non-hunting friends and a lot of non-hunting, like a lot of dudes with their girlfriends who have never hunted and don't like hunting, watch our hunt films, and they watch them because they like the adventure, because they see us eating it, because they look at what we do and they see, okay, I could get behind this. This makes sense to me. And it's because they form their opinions on how they see us hunt, how they see how we care for it, the wildlife. We're not just doing it in a way that's distasteful to them or seems wanton or cynical or bloodthirsty. They see us do it in a ethical, humane way, and that does matter. That matters because it forms perceptions and it impacts the future. There were some social studies done on hunting, and what the conclusions of the study were in terms of hunting's longevity and acceptance inside society was simply this: hunting would be acceptable so long as people believe that the motives for hunting were proper.
So Steven Ranella was one time talking about how he came in on his kids and they were watching some cartoon. It's I think it was Open Season is what it is. And these guys end up shooting a bear or a moose or something. I've never actually seen Open Season, but there's some animals, and the bad guys are the hunters, and they shoot. I think it's the bear. They shoot the bear, and they run up to each other and they high five. I'm like, yeah, but the bear, they didn't actually shoot the bear. The bear's playing dead. And the next thing they do is they bust out their phone and they're having this selfie shoot and they're taking pictures with them and the bear. They're laying across the bear. They're posing in front of the bear. They're prostrating the bear like it's like Weekend at Bernie's, and they're sitting with the bear and like all sorts of weird, crazy stuff. And he's like, no wonder people grow up hating hunters.
Yeah. Well, and then if you watch that Disney travesty called Bambi.
Okay.
Which I love Bambi. And I mean, I grew up with that. But hunters are the mysterious evil force that can be, that are,
the quail. Can we talk about the quail scene for just a second? Yeah. You know the quail I'm talking about? The one that gets all twitchy and can't handle it and breaks and flies out? Did you have any sympathy for that bird growing up? I remember as a kid being like, good. I hate you.
It's funny. Like, I think you're right. There are those who, I see the same thing done. Be careful of words and wordplay. I always say words are powerful. And I tell people all the time, be careful with the way people phrase questions and with the things that they say. One of the things that I hear all the time, and I hear people use this term all the time. They said there was an explosion of gun violence in Chicago. There's an eruption of gun violence in New York. 127 people killed this weekend in an explosion of gun violence.
There's a meteoric rise of gun violence in Chicago.
And I'm like, why do we call it gun violence? The guns aren't violent or not violent. They're a tool. People are violent. Don't let people use that term on you. Yeah. Don't let them say there was an explosion of gun violence. What you mean is there was an explosion of crime. There was an explosion of people murdering other people. Whether they have a gun or a bow or a knife is not relevant in the sense that...
What would they do if someone went on a spree with hammers?
But what they want to do is shut down the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. And to do that, they're going to change the language to play with people's minds. So they're going to say things like, there's an explosion of gun violence. So then you're afraid of guns, right? Because the guns just got up, walked into Chicago and shot everybody by themselves. Because you're calling it gun violence. Guns just do what guns do. And you're also putting all the blame and accountability and responsibility on the gun. It's an inanimate object. Guns are neither moral or immoral. They're just tools.
I have a concealed carry license, and I carry my handgun with me just about everywhere. And there's been a couple times where I've gotten in conversations with people who are not necessarily, I wouldn't even say that they're against the Second Amendment, but are they did not grow up with firearms in the home. And I tell them that, we end up having a conversation. I'm like, well, I've had a gun in my pocket almost every time I've ever hung out with you, and it's never hurt either one of us.
Right.
And the blood just drains from their face when they realize they've been in the presence of a firearm several times. And then you pull that firearm out, and their faces, man, I don't know how to describe it. There's some fear there, some legit fear.
I think it's interesting because when I was a kid, I'd be at my uncle's house and there'd be guns just laying against the wall.
Yeah, we used guns as decorations.
There was just guns, like stacks of them on
the gun cabinets right over there.
Pistol over here.
The glass gun cabinet.
They were just all around us. You grow up around guns like that. We were all taught to respect guns and so on. And we were smart with firearms, but we're not afraid of them. It's a gun, just like a screwdriver or a drill.
I tell people, if you grew up in a house where dad had a chair and you knew not to touch dad's chair,
right,
you could probably get away with the same principle
now,
with firearm.
Now, it's not to say that they were, that we didn't do dumb things. Like, I remember sneaking off with a 30-30 we stole from Uncle Bill. And me and Ben, I don't know how old we were. We were young, Cousin Ben, and we got that gun and we brought bullets. I don't even know if we knew that they were the right bullets. Thank goodness they were. I don't know. We shot like 30 rounds into a log for fun, and we didn't know what we were doing, and we caught hell for it.
Yeah.
And
did you do it again?
No, never, ever, ever again. It was awful. It's one of those things where you just wished you had just walked away, like just not done that. The only other time where it was worse is when we found a little Playboy, like half ripped up magazine. Found a little Playboy magazine, and it was us, and we like carried it home, and it was a group of cousins, and then our moms found out it was girls and the guys, and I think Ben had it in his lap, and he threw it to his sister threw it to him, they threw it over here.
Hot potato?
As their mom was trying to bang open the door, caught him red-handed. We were young, and caught hell for that too. So But I mean, these things are, back to the way we say things and perceptions. When I say this all the time, say what you mean and mean what you say. Use your words the right way. So when someone says to me, gun violence is everywhere, I say, you mean criminal violence? You mean people killing other people?
With guns?
With guns?
How many of those people are defending themselves with guns? Because that's still violent.
Again, because the accountability, the responsibility is on the individual. And that should be how we frame our discussion. The gun is not the committer of the crime. And so we shouldn't say gun violence erupted. We should say, I don't mind if you say violence, but it's this third party passive. It just erupted like a volcano. Like nobody controlled it. It just happened. It's like, no. People deliberately went out and shot other people. That's a crime. Violence, crime happened. There was an explosion of crime, an increase in crime, people going out and committing murder. It's not the same thing as gun violence just appeared in Chicago. It's like, let's use our words more honestly.
My wife works behind the gun counter at Sportsman's, and her favorite argument is the spoon didn't make you fat.
Yeah, that's the argument I had with my wife early on in our marriage.
Yeah?
Yeah. She had a baby, of course, and you put on baby weight and you gained some weight, and she didn't like her weight, and she was having trouble losing the weight. With Caitlin, it just dropped off. With the second kid, it just was hard, and she had been putting some effort into it, but she honestly had 2 children now, and she was busy. I was working a lot, and she wasn't really buckling down on getting herself into how she wanted to look and feel. And I remember she was trying on clothes for something she wanted to go on. I'm dragging along. I'm like at the department store. And we're going through, and something like she's like, do these jeans make me look fat? And I'm like, no, you're just fat. Like you're just overweight. And there's no jeans that are going to make. I know my wife. She's never going to be satisfied with any pair of pants she puts on when she's that heavy. She's just not. And so I'm like, let's use our words properly. The jeans don't make you look heavy. You're just heavy right now. So let's be honest about that and just say, do these jeans look better than these jeans given my current, weight? I'm okay with that. But I don't like the idea that you're a victim in this situation in the sense that, the jeans are causing something to look a way that, isn't real.
Jeans don't come with a muffin top.
Right. So some people don't like that much truth and honesty.
No one likes that much truth.
But I think if we were more truthful and said exactly what was going on, we'd be happier. Well, Suzanne and I we dig each other. We're madly in love. And I think part of that is because we have been so truthful and honest with each other from day one. She's never let me get away with any, I'd guess, delusional thoughts or like, she keeps the truth in the forefront of my mind as I do for her. So we don't get caught in these games of telling lies to ourselves and then finally believing them because we have a spouse that calls us out on it every time. All right, back to the book. He says, what is an ethic? To become ethical hunters, we need to understand what ethics are. Here are some general definitions. An ethic is a body of moral principles or values associated with a particular culture or group. Ethics are rules of conduct recognized in respect to a particular group or culture. So using these ideas, a definition of an ethical hunter could be constructed as follows. Brent, a person who follows all the rules of proper behavior in a way that will satisfy what society expects of him or her as a hunter. I chafe at that.
I was going to say, man, as you're reading that, I'm already buckling down and frowning. I'm just like,
There's a certain chafing. I understand what he's saying.
But my American muscle just starts bristling at being told what to do.
Well, I'll continue reading and then we'll expound on that. The definition misses something. It is not good enough because it left out wildlife, the animals we hunt. Although some people may not consider wildlife a part of human culture, it is part of the hunter's culture. Nothing is more important to hunters than the animals they hunt. To be a hunter, you must, above all else, know and respect the animals and their needs. With this in mind, the definition of an ethical hunter becomes, quote, a person who knows and respects the animals hunted, follows the law, and behaves in a way that will satisfy what society expects of him or her as a hunter.
I can get behind that.
I don't like the last line. I don't like it because, so let me read it again. A person who knows and respects the animals hunted, agreed. That could be a definition of an ethical hunter. Someone who knows and respects the animals that he hunts or she hunts, follows the law. That's obvious. The last part, though, and behaves in a way that will satisfy what society expects. I don't like that, for the reason being that I think at the end of the day, I don't really give a damn what society expects of me. I care what my conscience tells me, right? There's a certain degree of freedom of conscience to act in a way that I think is moral or right. I think you have to be careful when you say, okay, what does society expect of me? And now I'm going to conform to that. We see it right now. We see it a lot with identity politics. I've talked about this before. There are certain messages being pushed forward that it seems that the bulk of society or mainstream society expects of me to say and do and fall in line with. But my conscience tells me no. My personal beliefs tell me no. So I think that a better definition, in my opinion, than what Jim is positing right here is a person who knows and respects the animals hunted and follows the law and does his best to manage the perceptions that people have of him in his hunting, right? I understand managing perception. We all are in a world of social media. We all have iPhones and mobile devices pointed at us daily. Lives are very public now in a way they didn't used to be. Given that, there is a responsibility as a hunter, if you're going to engage in hunting, to conduct yourself in a way that society sees and perceives you as doing what you're really doing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. We all have talked about this before. It doesn't help us when we have some hunter go out, shoot an animal in the butt, track it for a while, shoot it again in the butt, watch it drag itself up a hill, finally get up there, make a somewhat killing shot, and then pulls out a knife and has to slit its throat, and then wastes the meat, right? Like a hunter's nightmare, right? Mm-hmm. I would argue he doesn't respect the animal. He doesn't know the animal, right? And it's not necessarily obeying all the game laws either. Could be the case. But even when, let's say, everything else was right, you know the animal, you respect the animal, and you're obeying all the game laws, but you just make a mistake, right? And the animal is really suffering. Well, as a hunter, managing the perception that people have of you is sort of incumbent on all of us to be responsible about that. That means that when you do show a picture, an image, a photo, or you bring people along on that experience, that you do your best to manage that perception. I don't think you should lie and cover up the realities of hunting, but I think you should provide lots of context around them. And some things that are graphic or hard to see, it's okay not to include that in your content when you're representing hunting. It's just like any messy business. I don't necessarily want, I know you clean sewage as a city worker, right? I don't need to see the part where you're actually sucking the sewage out of the sewage system. I can just understand your dirty jobs, how your dirty job works. I don't necessarily need the gritty details of that. Anyway, back to his definition. I don't like the part where he says behaves in a way that satisfies what society expects of him. I don't think you should conform to society. I think you should conform to your conscience. Be as truthful to yourself about the world around you and be as truthful as possible. Society can go way, way down the wrong road. Society expected German citizens to turn Jews over to the government. That's what society expected. But was it right? No. Often, especially in totalitarian or government situations, society is wrong. And there's only a few people with the courage or the conscience to stand up to the pressures of society. So I don't like the definition. I don't like it. I think that I understand it in terms of, like I said, managing perception, but I think it's wrong to think of yourself as satisfying what society expects of you. And I realize that's part of the definition of the ethic. I don't care. I think it's wrong, at least from that perspective. Now, later he says the definition has three main parts: knowing and respecting the animals, obeying the law, and behaving in the right way. Now, behaving in the right way, I think that comes down to personal conscience, freedom of conscience, and should not be dictated by societal pressures. It should be dictated by personal moral fortitude. Each of these parts affects the way hunters think and act. Understanding these parts will provide a foundation for ethical hunting that should satisfy hunters and the society in which they live. Okay. So the next part, which we're going to cover on another show as we go through this book, is about knowing and respecting wildlife. And he gets into if you're going to hunt wildlife, Brent, you have a moral duty to understand where their lungs and their heart are. You have a moral responsibility to know what time of day or like the conditions, like, oh, I can shoot it right here. I know mountain goats live at the top of mountains, but I have a moral responsibility to kill it and recover it, not just kill it, right? So there's all these things that go into play. And he talks about being a predator. As you learn about animals, you will also learn that the presence of hunters in the animals world is natural. A hunter is a predator participating in a world where predation belongs. Just as predators belong to the natural system, an ethical hunter also belongs to the natural system. That sense of belonging becomes real when you hunt. And I think that that's vitally important. And we're going to get into that because the idea that we're somehow apart from nature and not part of it is, I think, a disease. It's a bad way of thinking in today's modern world. Oh, hunting is what animals do to other animals. We don't do that. Or, hunting is something anachronistic or of the past. It doesn't really apply today. I think that's a really bad way of thinking because we're hunters. Human beings are predators. We are part of the natural world. We're part of this whole system. We're overwhelming in our power within it. But I think that it's really important to have that discussion with people who are non-hunters, that they understand that human beings aren't apart from nature. We're woven into it. And the idea that we can have civilization over here and nature can just do its thing over here and we don't need to overlap at all. Like if you just stop hunting and just leave the wild alone, it's too late. We've taken over 70, 80% of the land mass in the United States and put buildings and houses and roads on it. You can't just relegate a population of elk to this little spot on a map and say, they're good. They're good if we just leave everything alone. It doesn't work that way anymore. And so getting into man's role in nature as a predator, a very good discussion. So we'll get into that next time. And hope you guys liked this discussion. Hope it got you thinking. And this book, again, is called Beyond Fair Chase, The Ethic and Tradition of Hunting by Jim Posowitz. It's a great read, and Jim was a good dude. Thanks for tuning in. Stay gritty, folks.